Well, are we all ready? We got cameras.
I can recall that day. I think I even had a new maroon tie. You know, I suppose it was because all the seats were all in Queensland.
So I had all of my PowerPoints, and you know, I was about to illustrate it. John Howard came in and did the launch. He was supposed to give a 10-minute introduction. I think he went for an hour.
And we'll be saying to the Australian people, we've got a plan and a vision for the next century. Our opponents just say no to everything. And I think that will be a very, very stark contrast. Thank you very much.
Even before the GST had been launched, tension between the Prime Minister and his Treasurer had surfaced.
I'm just going to do 5 slides now.
Pauline Hanson and her One Nation party had not gone away. They were proving a real threat to the government's chances at the next election. In May 1998, Peter Costello saw an opportunity to act.
Peter thought that she'd been allowed to gain a life of her own because there hadn't been a sustained attack on what she was saying.
Australia to me is my home, and my fellow Australians, my family.
The Treasurer decided there was something he could do. He'd direct preferences in his seat of Higgins to Labor ahead of One Nation. Peter Costello would put Pauline Hanson last on his how to vote card.
Well, at that stage, John Howard was saying we shouldn't allocate our preferences. Our position at that point was we weren't going to decide whether One Nation would go last. We would leave it open. I thought the argument was doing us damage. It was going on day after day, and I thought it had to be resolved. I couldn't announce what we would do throughout the country. I wasn't the leader, but I could announce what I'd do in my own seat.
A television interview provided the opportunity for his announcement.
I want to make it entirely clear that is not the future for Australia. The future for Australia is built on tolerance and respect.
After the interview, we went to Treasury Place, and shortly after, the Prime Minister rang and spent 45 minutes on the phone with the Treasurer. The Prime Minister clearly was not happy with what Peter had said.
I got the sense that he wanted to keep the option open of preferencing One Nation. I thought that was not a sensible option, that the controversy would be too great, that it was morally wrong, and it was politically wrong. And so I said, I'm not taking that option.
After he got off the phone, he sort of was a bit, you know, well, did I do the right thing? Maybe I shouldn't have, but we all felt he had, so he got his confidence back, I guess, and went on.
Well, I don't know that I remember what I thought at the time. I just remember having the view that we should have a blanket approach in relation to preferences.
Good day for a budget? It's a good day for a budget, yep.
2 days later, Peter Costello returned to Canberra to deliver the 1998 budget, finally wiping out Labor's $9 billion black hole. It should have been a moment of triumph for the Treasurer.
That was quite a tense party meeting because the Prime Minister was still not happy. The Prime Minister led a round of applause for Peter Reith for his handling of the waterfront dispute. And there was no sort of recognition for Peter of what he'd been doing and how hard he'd been working and, you know, restoring the finances and all that. So that created another little bit of tension to add to what was already there.
This morning, I called on His Excellency the Governor-General and recommended to him that the Parliament should be prorogued.
John Howard called an election for the 3rd of October 1998. In the end, the Prime Minister had no choice but to follow his Treasurer's lead. One Nation was last on the Liberal Party's how to vote card. But Pauline Hanson would not be the major issue in the campaign. This election would be a referendum on the GST.
How do I know you won't, in the next 2 years, up the GST?
Well, it won't even be introduced. until 2 years' time.
The 10% will apply to funerals, and that is absolutely bloody disgusting.
The GST was a big political problem.
And if I wanted people to think one thing of it, I would want them to think that it was good for Australia.
Look, 3 days out from polling day, I said to myself, stop campaigning on tax, mate.
We're losing altitude very quickly.
We've certainly got the other side worried, and they deserve to be.
No, the adrenaline is keeping me up and elevated.
As the leaders made their final pitch, the influential news poll was recording a last-minute swing to Labor.
A lucky vote, Mr. Howard. I hope so.
No, wrong timing.
I'll remember that next time.
Next time.
Yes,
Next
go with us next time.
I thought we could be a one-term wonder. Yes, I did, because the polls were not good. And there was a terrible poll that came out on the Thursday before the election that showed Labor at 53 and us at 47.
As the polls closed, John Howard was steeling himself for the worst.
I remember going to Kirribilli House on election night, and Jeanette Howard met me at the door and she said, he's just been given some exit poll figures which are not good. Go and cheer him up.
Linton Crosby rang me and he was a bit late and I knew it was crook. And he said 53-47 the wrong way, and I said thanks a lot.
It's not often the Liberal Party does exit polls, but this one said he'd probably lose. And the first figures, we're in his study at Kirribilli House, and the first figures that came in were just awful. And there were very, very good soldiers losing their seat.
So I got the family into the green room at Kirribilli House and administered the last rites.
It had been a highly charged first term for John Howard. His mission to recast Australia had met rapid and radical change. 3 years on, the question for John Howard and the voters was, at what price?
In a moment, to look at next week's program. And you can discover more about the Howard years with extended interviews, timelines and